Welcome back to the Believe in Jets podcast. My name is Rami Lavi. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of news stories. And so we'll get to that. We'll do an episode with Bilal. I've been in contact with him. We talked about Davante Adams. We talked about a whole bunch of different stuff because the Jets can't seem to stay out of the headlines. But on today's episode, we have a special guest, Antwan Staley from the New York Daily News. He's going to join us to talk about all things Jets, all the biggest news headlines. He's in the locker room. He's in the know. He knows what's going on. So definitely check him out. So I want to kick it to that interview now. It was a great interview. We got a ton of information with him. So that is coming up right now. Joining me now on the Believe in Jets podcast from the New York Daily News, Antwan Staley. Antwan, how you doing today? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. We got to start here because you wrote the article about 40-year-old quarterbacks and especially guys coming off an Achilles injury. So what are your realistic expectations of Aaron Rodgers trying to do something that most guys can't do and we haven't seen many do?
Well, it's really no precedent for this. I mean, and the fact of the matter is, it's not a lot of quarterbacks that have come off with Achilles injuries to begin with, but there are some. I mean, you talk about, Kirk Cousins is kind of in the same position there. He's a little bit younger at 35, but still an older quarterback there. But, you look at guys like Dan Marino, Vinny Testaverde. I guess that's the kind of the where you start, although Aaron is a different kind of quarterback than those guys were. But, look at Marino. He ended up winning comeback player of the year when he ended up suffering the injury. Now, obviously modern medicine has changed so much within the last 30 years. So you have to hope if, you're a Jets fan or just, you're part of the organization that, that might be an Aaron Rodgers benefit. But for what I saw in OTAs and minicamp, the minicamp and all-season program, although he wasn't there for mandatory minicamp, obviously, because that's been a big story. But I think he looked pretty sharp. I mean, you're not going to know until really the live bullets start going flying and you see him move from side to side there. I think that's probably the next step for Aaron in his process. But, he's always going to be able to throw it. I think he actually said that to us last year that, he could be 70 years old and probably still, be able to throw the football down the field. It's just a matter of, can he move from side to side? And I definitely think, that's the next process for him. But I can definitely see him having a, really good season. I don't know if it's going to be like MVP, 2020, 21 Aaron Rodgers, but, I don't know if the Jets necessarily need him to be that. I just think they need him to just be able to take care of the football and, get the, be a sound decision maker.
Amazingly, last year, if they scored 19 points a game, they would have had at least 10 wins, right? So, they don't need him to be MVP Aaron Rodgers. They do need him to be bought in, though. And you mentioned his trip to Egypt, missing mandatory minicamp. How much stock do you put in that? Do you think it's a big deal? What do the people around the building think? Do they think it's a big deal?
Not really. I mean, it was something that was pre-planned. I don't think it's a big deal at all. I mean, it's mandatory minicamp. I mean, it was 2 days. I mean, he was there for the whole off-season program for the most part. So I really don't think – I take it with a grain of salt. I mean, he was there for the whole off-season program anyway. So I don't think it's necessarily a big deal there. I think the optics probably was worse than what it really was. And then probably the way Robert Saleh handled it could have been a lot better. But, the fact of the matter is it was 2 days of guys just practicing in shorts, something he was already doing anyway. So, yeah, I don't think it's a big deal there. I just think the optics of it was probably worse than what it really was.
You mentioned Saleh and the optics. That's been a common theme with him throughout his time here, right? The optics don't look great with him. He's clunky. And so in a season that is really win or bust, everyone's talked about this. They have to win. They have to finally perform. And Saleh's getting yet another chance. What's your confidence level in him as a head coach? I don't see him as a guy who I can see in February on a float. Do you see that?
It remains to be seen. But do I think they could possibly make the playoffs? Yeah, I think they could do that. I think that might be enough to save his job. I think they have to make the playoffs. I think that's the bar, like, that they have to set. They have to cross. Anything below that, then I think, the Jets are going to make wholesale changes, not just with him. And, could be Joe Douglas' job potentially in jeopardy. And then if you bring in a new coach and a general manager, they're probably going to want their own quarterback, especially a guy that's, at the time will be 41 years old and Aaron Rodgers. So, you can imagine it's going to be a lot of changes there, which I think you don't necessarily want because they're going for it. Like I think the next 2 years are really going to be key for them, especially considering Aaron's age and the way they set this team up as well. So yeah, I think it remains to be seen if Robert Saleh can actually do this. I mean, he's had 3 consecutive losing seasons there. We also saw teams that also had injuries last year make the playoffs. I mean, you look at the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they had injuries at quarterback. They had 4 different starting quarterbacks. They had injuries on the offensive line. Their defense was just as good as the Jets. And then they still found a way to get into the playoffs. I mean, they got beat by the Texans pretty soundly, but they still found a way to get into the playoffs despite everything that happened. So, Roberts, obviously, under a lot of pressure right now to get the job done. They got a mulligan last year, him and Joe Douglas, but they have to make the playoffs. Like that's just, anything else than that is unacceptable. And I definitely think, it's going to be a lot of changes that's going to be made.
Yeah. So as far as the optics, again, with Rodgers, he's the guy who talks about eliminate all distractions. Anything that's not related to football needs to be out the room. How do his teammates feel about him being the guy that everything unrelated to football, he's the one bringing into the room?
I think when you're good, you're allowed to get some type of a leash. That's just kind of reality. And whether you talk about in sports or any walk of life, you get away with certain things. And when you're, doing your job right and you're doing the right things, and also you're doing it well. And then that's what Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. He's a future Hall of Famer, 4-time MVP, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And the Jets understand that they need him to win. So I think the players are fine with, or at least from the outside looking in. They're not saying anything in terms of like they dislike some of the things that's been going on, but it is a distraction. You have to look at it. Pat McAfee show. Things that were said in the off season there. We'll see, what's said throughout the course of the season there, whether it be, to reporters or on McAfee and things of that nature. But, for all accounts, his teammates really like him. The teammates really, they really to go to bat for Aaron. And then when he went down last year, a lot of people just felt the various different types of emotions. Where you talk about Garrett Wilson, who had anticipated him having probably the best season, although it's his second year in the league, having a tremendous season. I still think he had a good year, despite the fact that, they had so many quarterbacks, like they did in his rookie year. Or you had a guy like Alan Lazar who, has played with Aaron and understands him and, was pretty much a non-factor. But I definitely think they really ride out for Aaron. And, I think they understand that, he comes with a lot of baggage, but they also understand that he gives them the best chance to win.
In the latest Aaron Rodgers news story, he talked about playing with Davante Adams, quote, again. And that became a big story. My colleague at WFAN, Boomer Esiason, talked about it as well. He said he could see this happening in August. Do you see a Davante Adams trade being realistic prior to this season?
It's up to Adams. Like, from what I understand, I've talked to Raiders people and personnel, is he's happy being a Raider. Like, until that changes, then he's going to stay with the Raiders. I mean, if he's going to the Raiders and say, you know what, hey, I would like to be traded to the Jets, I'm sure they would accommodate that request. But he likes Antonio Pierce. He likes the team that's coming back there. I think it'll be a situation where they're going to play it out. They're going to see how it is to the trading deadline. I don't see anything happening before the season unless something crazy were to happen. I mean, you never know in sports. I mean, but at the same time, if the Raiders start losing a number of games, Gardner Minshew doesn't necessarily work out. Aiden O'Connor, whoever wins that quarterback battle with the Raiders, and then he gets frustrated, kind of like you saw the receivers, the Netflix series where Jimmy Garoppolo, and it was kind of at a break. It was kind of a bit of a crossroad there between Josh McDaniels and also Jimmy Garoppolo. Had that continued to happen, then he already might be a Jet right now. But I don't know if it's going to happen in August, but it's potentially, he basically could change his mind, upon the trading deadline, depending on what happens with the Raiders. So, it's one of those wait and see things, but it's on him. Like, he really wants to be there with the Raiders, from what I understand. And again, until that changes, then he'll continue to be in Vegas.
What happens for a team, a guy like Garrett Wilson that you talked about expecting to have a career year, Mike Williams choosing to come here, maybe a sandwich played a role in that, maybe it didn't. Breece Hall wants to get touches. And now Rodgers brings in his buddy, Davante, and now all of a sudden all of our touches are going down. How does that change the dynamic in the room?
I think as long as you're winning, it doesn't change anything. I mean, winning sauce is the ultimate deodorant. I think Bill Parcells said that years ago. When you're winning, everybody's willing to take less of a role there, and understand is things are going to change there. I mean, you may not get 100 balls a year, but you're winning, and have a chance to win a Super Bowl and do some great things. But if they're not winning, and then if Davante were to come in, then Eagles are going to get in the way there. Obviously, Garrett Wilson, after the 2024 season, he'll be eligible to get a contract extension along with Sauce and Brees and Jermaine as well. But yeah, I think as long as they win and have the fulfill their expectations, then I think they'll be totally fine. If they don't, then Eagles, football players have egos. I mean, there's no way around it there. I mean, that's what kind of got them to this point in the NFL. But as long as they're winning, then I think the Jets will be totally fine. And I think Garrett and some of the other guys will be totally okay with that as well.
You mentioned the contracts. I'm so curious. I've been thinking about this since, these guys arrived, and obviously the window is now while they're young, but Brees and Sauce in particular, who, second contracts for corners don't often look great. Second contracts for running backs are not huge these days. What do those contracts look like in the next couple of years?
It's going to be interesting because like they have a problem. They're gonna have a problem. It's the same similar type of problem that the Dolphins are currently facing too, where they have to pay a lot of different people. Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Tua. Also, what the Dolphins are facing too as well. Tyreek Hill next year as well. They're gonna have to figure out what to do with him. It's going to be, I think Sauce, it's going to be what they're going to try to get done first. Like, because I think he's, proven it. It's been an all-pro his first couple of years there, arguably the best cornerback in football there. I think he's going to get the biggest, defensive back, cornerback contract in the history of the NFL, bar none. I think you have to get that taken care of. I think everything else, Brees, if he ends up having a season like, a la Christian McCaffrey and like how I think he might have, then he might be next up too, because he doesn't have that 5th-year option like how Garrett and Jermaine and obviously Sauce have. So you don't have that window and add a security blanket like those guys have. So you have to try to lock that down early. And also, the sooner you pay them, the better off it'll be. The worse off it'll be if you keep waiting, and then he's going to want to break the bank too as well. So yeah, I think as far as numbers, man, I think Sauce is going to get like probably 100, like maybe 100 mil. Like I think it's gonna be big money. It's gonna be, as far as guaranteed money, it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be record setting.
What do you think the Dolphins do with Tua Tagovailoa on that contract?
I think at this point, they might just play it out. I mean, they might just play the year out and then just see what he can do, see if he can stay healthy. And if he stays healthy, then great. You can, try to find out a way to sign him to a contract extension at the end of the year. If you can't, agree on a deal, then you could always franchise tag him. You have that in your back pocket too as well. And then force him to play on the franchise tag next year too. But, it's a lot of injuries concerns with Tua. He was able to stay healthy last year. He's lost a lot of weight throughout the course of the offseason too. He's looked like a pencil thin, which kind of concerns me considering the fact that he put on some weight last year, was able to stay healthy. It might have not all been good weight, but he was able to stay healthy and, had a productive year, and it would help the Dolphins get to the playoffs. But yeah, I don't know at this point. He probably wants to be paid like, a top quarterback in the league. But, realistically, I think he's, an above average quarterback. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I'm not going to sit here and say he isn't, but I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, at least right now.
And especially if you give him the franchise tag, that really hamstrings you, right? And we've seen this with the Giants, right? They wanted it to play out with Daniel Jones. We're seeing it play out now publicly for everyone to see on Hard Knocks. Have you caught any of that?
Yeah, I have too. I have as well. And then it's and then the interesting dynamic is between them choosing essentially Saquon choosing Daniel Jones over Saquon. And then now you have to deal with the backlash too. And you're reliving that all over again, with the Hard Knocks too. So it can't be, it's not a good situation for the Giants.
Off his life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Speaking of contracts, the Jets still have a big one looming, and the Eagles have a big one hanging over their head with Hassan Reddick. Hasn't shown up yet. Is he going to show up? How does this get resolved? Do you trust Joe Douglas in this spot as much as I trust Joe Douglas? Because I think Joe Douglas is a great general manager. What do you think happens with the Hassan Reddick situation? Does he get a long-term deal from the Jets, or does he just decide, hey, I'm going to show up and play?
Well, I mean, if he doesn't show up, then he's going to get fined $50,000 each day he does in their training camp. So I think
Good
it'd be
incentive.
it's his best benefit to go ahead and show up, especially considering he's already been fined for missing mandatory minicamp, and then he missed out on his workout bonus too as well, which is $250,000. So yeah, I definitely think he has to show up there. I know he was had a camp over the weekend. He refused to answer any questions in regard to his contract situation. So, he's still thinking about it. But I imagine he'll show up because if anything, he could show up and just not practice. But I think the Jets' expectation for what I've been told is they expect him to play on the last year of his deal. And then, we'll see after the season and see if they can make it work.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily know. Like, again, this season, there's so much hinging on this season. Who knows if they want him beyond this season, if he's great this year or not. It doesn't matter. That they thought they were bringing in a guy to go all in this year, and that's pretty much been the story. So with all these negative stories that I've brought up, I mean, I feel like there's still so much positive, right? This team does or should have one of the best defenses in the league. You have Garrett and Brees and Mike Williams. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, what are your expectations for this team?
I think if all goes right, then I think they can contend for the division. If the worst case scenario can be a wild card team, I definitely think Buffalo is still the team to beat in the division. Obviously, because Josh Allen gives them a great chance to win, but at the same time, the Jets have a great defense there. They still have some questions too defensively because you lose John Franklin Myers, who I think statistically he's not a big loss, but he was a big leader of that defense. So, and then you already have questions with the run defense too as well, which finished 25th in the league last year. I think some of that had to do with the fact that the defense would kept having to go out there on the field a whole lot, so they kind of wore down from time to time there. But it was an issue, so they hope that guys like Javon Kinlaw, other guys there could also help too. Reddick there, but I definitely think they still have some questions on the defensive line too as well. And you hope that C.J. Mosley can still play at a high level too as well. And then the safety position is still a little bit of a question. You got Chuck Clark coming back there from a significant injury there. Tony Adams is still relatively young too as well. I know Jet fans were hoping they would sign Justin Simmons there, who could possibly be, a stopgap guy that could really help them this year. But, they just can't pay everybody. You don't really have enough money to do all of that. So, yeah, I definitely think, they still have a little bit of holes there, but you have to hope that your defense can continue to play at that top 5 level that we've seen the last couple of years.
I know it's a little early. We still haven't gotten rookies report in 2 days, right? So
yes,
we still haven't gotten to see anyone on the field and what that looks like. I'm excited for football. I mean, 5 days away now. Is that what it is before the whole team reports?
The 23rd. Like
yes.
Yeah, they start practicing on the 24th.
Okay. All right. So about a week away.
Yeah, about a week.
About a week away from everyone reporting. I'm fired up for it. If you have to give a far out prediction for this season, how do you predict the Jet season goes?
Yeah, I'm not there yet. And record wise, I'm not there yet. But I definitely think they are a team that I definitely could see them making the playoffs. I think they have to.
I mean, at the very least, right?
Yeah, I definitely think they definitely can make the playoffs. I'll say that. But as far as record wise and numbers wise, yeah, I don't know yet. Probably thinking anywhere from 9 to 11 wins is about where I'm at with the Jets.
You think Aaron Rodgers plays 16 games, 17 games, 12 games? What do you think?
Oh, if he plays 12 games or less, then I think they're in trouble. Because especially with that schedule, like they need him to play 16, 17 games. Otherwise, especially in the stacked AFC, like you're going to run into some problems there. Even now, like even if he stays healthy, it's no guarantee because I mean, look at the AFC: Buffalo, Miami, the Jets. That's all in one division. AFC South, like you got Houston, who's everybody's darling right now. Jacksonville, I mean, I know Jacksonville finished 9-8, but they're the year before that, they were in the AFC divisional round. I mean, and then obviously you got the Chiefs. They're not going anywhere. And then I hadn't even got to the point where we talked about the AFC North, where all four teams finished over 500 last year. And
Yep.
then this was out. Joe Burrow didn't even play like most of the last season, so it's stacked. It's going to be a dogfight in the whole conference, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch, throughout the course of the year.
I got to ask you, you're wearing the Baltimore hat. Are you an Orioles fan?
I grew up an Orioles fan, yes.
All right. So you grew up down there in Maryland?
No, I actually grew up in North Carolina, but North Carolina doesn't have a baseball team.
Gotcha. So you ended up becoming an Orioles fan. So you following along this year, you guys, that game on Sunday, I'm a big Yankee fan. I mean, what a wild game. How you feeling about the Orioles going into the second half?
I think they'll be fine. I mean, I think, the tension between them and the Yankees have been a long time coming. I mean, I think a lot of people have taken exception to, it's particularly the Yankees, of the way that the Orioles have kind of pitched them inside. In particular, Aaron Judge, Soto, some of those guys too as well. So I figured a fight was coming in some way. Maybe not as much as what happened on Friday night, but it's obviously tensions there. Orioles are the team that won the division. The Yankees are a team that's, trying to get to that level and trying to get back to, what their standard is, which is competing for World Series there. So it's always they're going to be button heads too. And everybody in the division hates the Yankees. So, that's kind of what it is. But I think the Orioles will be fun. I think they're going to be contenders in the AL. And, I wouldn't be surprised if three teams were to make it in the AL East, including the Red Sox, who is really hot right now.
Yeah, and like what's crazy is no one hates the Yankees more than Yankee fans themselves. And any Orioles fan who thought that Clay Holmes throwing at Heston Kjerstad was on purpose, well, just watch Sunday's game. You realize he has no idea where the ball's going ever, so that definitely wasn't on purpose.
That is true.
Yeah, tension's boiling over. I expect it to be a fun second half.
Yeah, for sure. I think the AL is going to be very interesting too, because I mean Cleveland's playing really well too. I think they're kind of they're under the radar a little bit there, but they have the best record in the league right now, so you got to give them props too as well.
Yep. All right. Should be a fun second half of the baseball season, and then we get football, and I'm excited for football. I'm looking forward. Well, maybe we'll talk to you again down the line, maybe with Bilal as well. So thanks for doing this, Antwan. Until next time, I'll see you. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Antwan, for joining us. Again, great interview with Antwan. Again, I have a lot to get to with Bilal. We haven't talked, of course, on the podcast in a while. So we will talk to Bilal at a later point. Maybe I'll give my thoughts on the Davante Adams situation and what Boomer said. I'm in the building every day with Boomer, of course. I see him. I don't think he's lying. I obviously also know that grain of salt spot. That's what everyone's saying. Take what he said, his report with a grain of salt. It's not necessarily just because he said it could happen doesn't mean it will happen. So that's the situation with Davante Adams, but definitely could be an interesting dynamic. And Bilal, the reason I asked Antwan that dynamic question about the dynamic in the room, and of course winning cures all, and that's what Antwan answered, and he's right about that. But the reason I asked that question is because Bilal mentioned something about it. And so he said it to me. He's like, hey, just be careful. Look out. That could be something that pipes up, guys expecting to get theirs, guys who have been top receivers in the league, like a Garrett Wilson, like a Mike Williams, now having to share snaps with not just a guy, any guy, or not just any great receiver, but a guy who's such good friends with Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers forcing his way here. And ultimately, whether it happens or not, Rodgers, I'm sure, would like to play with him. And that's probably just his way of saying, hey, I'd like to play with him. Let me throw this out there and see if it causes anything, and see if it ultimately comes back to me and gets him closer to playing with me. I don't think Rodgers would mind that. So just kind of an interesting thing from that perspective as well. All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Until next time, please like, subscribe, share the podcast. We're going to be having Antwan on a bunch. We'll have a lot of guests, but me and Bilal are going to be doing episodes together. It's been a fun time. I don't know if we can compete with the Believe in Giants podcast, or I'm not sure what they call it. Sims Complete, the Phil Sims, and I think it's Phil and Matt, or Phil and Chris. It's one of the Sims kids with Phil Sims. And they had Daniel Jones on, so that's pretty cool. Starting quarterback, although he said nothing because he's Daniel Jones. He doesn't say anything ever. But check that out if you're a Giant fan. I do want to talk about the Hard Knocks, get into that a little bit more, because I've been enjoying it a ton. Like, I love it. I didn't think I was going to be that into it. When it first came out, I was like, all right, Hard Knocks, off season, whatever. You've seen one Hard Knocks, you've seen them all. Now I can't wait. It's 1:30 on a Tuesday. I can't wait for tonight when I get to watch Hard Knocks again. So And of course, we had to bring up the Yankees a little bit at the end. My God, this is a much needed break from the Yankees. So I can't wait for football season to come around. So, like I said, until next time, like, subscribe, share the podcast. I appreciate you all for listening. See ya.